"Len, why is there a strange car in our driveway?" I asked innocently enough, peeking through the living room curtains. An eerie silence fell over the room. Len didn't respond, his face frozen like a deer caught in headlights. "Well?" I pressed, my heartbeat quickening. "Who does that blue Honda belong to?" Len cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his recliner. Must belong to one of the neighbors. You know how people park wherever around here." I furrowed my brow, not buying his excuse for a second, but it's pulled up right against the garage door, and I could have sworn I heard voices coming from the shed. Pushing himself up with a grunt, Len waved his hand dismissively. "You're hearing things, dear. I'm going to run some errands. We're out of milk and... Marching towards the back door, I cut him off. "Not so fast, mister. We're getting to the bottom of this right now." I flung open the door and stepped outside, the hot summer sun beating down. Len reluctantly followed behind as I made a beeline for the shed, steeling myself for what I might find. With a trembling hand, I pulled open the shed door. The sight before me sucked the wind right from my lungs. There she was, a young, attractive woman, frantically pulling her dress back on as she sat on an overturned bucket, her makeup smeared and hair disheveled. A visceral cry escaped my lips as the reality smashed into me like a freight train. My husband of 22 years, the man I thought I knew inside and out, was having an affair. "Marla, I can explain," Len sputtered, rushing over with panic in his eyes. I recoiled from his touch, feeling as though I didn't recognize this man anymore. "Save your lies. How long has this been going on? Who is she?" The woman hurriedly gathered her belongings, the tears flowing freely now. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault," she babbled as she rushed out of the shed, heading straight for her car. "Hey, we're not done here," I shouted after her retreating figure. But it was no use. She peeled out of the driveway in a cloud of dust and squealing tires, leaving me alone with the man I once trusted above all else. Len slumped against the shed and slowly sank to the ground, burying his face in his hands. "Please, let me try to make this right. Kara meant nothing. It was just a stupid fling." "A fling?" I spat, feeling the bile rise in the back of my throat. "We're supposed to be partners, for better or worse. But you've made a mockery of the most sacred vow two people can make. How could you do this to me? To us?" Len opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, silencing him. I couldn't stand to hear any more lies and half-truths at that moment. With tears stinging my eyes, I turned and headed back towards the house, feeling like I didn't recognize this man or my life at all anymore. My world had fallen apart in an instant, and the reality, as ugly and painful as it was, finally came into focus. The sparkling veil of my marriage had been violently ripped away. The life I thought I had was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated illusion. I spent that night lying awake, my mind spinning with a million thoughts as the devastating scene replayed over and over. How could Len, the supposed love of my life, do something so despicable? So cruel? As the sun peeked through the curtains the next morning, I turned to look at the empty space on the other side of the bed. Len hadn't come home after storming out of the house the previous day. Truthfully, I wasn't sure I even wanted him back. My head throbbing, I forced myself up and padded into the kitchen, hoping a strong cup of coffee might snap me out of this waking nightmare. The house felt eerily quiet without Len's usual whistling and humming as he got ready for work. I don't know why I allowed myself to be blindsided like this. Looking back, the signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. Len's little work dinners that kept getting later and later. The excessive spending and shopping trips he tried to hide. Those work conferences in different cities every few months where he traveled alone. I felt like such a fool for buying into the facade, for believing the lies and half-truths he so expertly fed me for who knows how long. Len Thomas, respected insurance agent, doting father, all-around family man. What a joke that turned out to be. As I took my first tentative sip of coffee, the front door burst open. "Speak of the devil." "Morning, honey," Len hollered in an overly chipper tone as he strolled inside, not a care in the world. There he plopped a paper bag from the bakery on the counter and leaned in to give me a peck on the cheek. Recoiling, I nearly spilled my coffee all over him. "Get away from me, you lying snake. Did you really think everything would just blow over after yesterday?" Len took a step back, hands raised in mock surrender. Hey, I said I was sorry. What happened with Kara was a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I slammed my mug down, sloshing the steaming liquid over the rim. Didn't mean anything? You were carrying on an affair behind my back, Len. Not to mention blowing through our life savings on God knows what else with your constant business trips. He shifted uncomfortably, his bravado faltering for just a moment before the callous mask slipped back into place. Look, I earned that money, so I can spend it however I damn well please. Unbelievable. My blood boiled over as the sheer depth of his narcissism and entitlement hit me. In that moment, it finally became clear this man only cared about himself. He had no concept of respect, loyalty, or commitment. Get out, I growled, fighting back hot tears of anger and humiliation. I couldn't stand to look at him a second longer. Take your syrupy apologies and go straight to hell. Len opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. With a huff, he snatched up his bakery bag and stormed back towards the front door. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, you ungrateful bitch, he shouted over his shoulder on the way out. As the door slammed behind him, the dam finally broke. I slumped against the kitchen counter, sobbing as reality came crashing down in waves. Not only was my marriage over after more than 2 decades, but the man I loved never truly existed. It was all an intricately woven web of lies. In the days and weeks after Len's explosive exit, I found myself slowly unraveling the tangled web of lies he had craftily spun over the years. What began as an isolated incident of infidelity quickly revealed itself to be just the tip of a much larger, more disturbing iceberg. First, there were the money issues. I pored over our bank statements and credit card bills, feeling my anger flare with each new piece of damning evidence. Months of unexplained cash withdrawals and charges at high-end hotels in cities I'd never stepped foot in. Thousands of dollars funneled into an offshore account I never knew existed. Len had been systematically draining our life savings to fund his indulgent double life on the side, all while spinning me fairy tales about the money going towards investments and financial planning for our future. My future certainly didn't include becoming a depressed, penniless divorcee at 45. But as appalling as the fiscal betrayal was, it paled in comparison to what I uncovered next. Proof that Kara from the shed incident was just the beginning of Len's womanizing ways. Stuffed away in his closet, buried under a pile of tacky tourist t-shirts, was a veritable Pandora's box of sordid evidence. Love letters and raunchy photos from at least 3 other mistresses I could identify by name. Crudely scribbled phone numbers and salacious details on scraps of paper. Transcripts of messaging apps brimming with explicit exchanges. It made me physically ill to think of how long this repugnant double life had been going on behind my back. The worst part? Mixed among the unsettling artifacts were photos of our son Evan at various ages, baseball games, prom night, his high school graduation. It was as though Len was using memories of his own child to try and paper over the cracks of his infidelity and lies. As enraged as I felt, there was also a sickening undercurrent of pity for Evan. My innocent little boy, who idolized his father, had been so calculatingly manipulated by his own flesh and blood. I steeled my resolve knowing I had to make things right, no matter how difficult or messy it would get. The floodgates of fury truly opened when I discovered Len had been sleeping with one of his co-workers at the insurance agency, Beth Kingsley. Thanks to a fortuitous Vegas trip with the workwives a few years back, I knew Beth all too well as the bubbly, sweet-seeming mom of 3 who fawned all over Len at every office party. Now, I had transcripts explicitly detailing their torrid sexcapades, hotel room trysts, flirty messages, and lurid recaps of their insatiable lust and passion for each other. Worst of all, there was clear evidence Beth had gotten pregnant with Len's child and terminated it in secret to avoid scrutiny and complications. That was the final straw. I had to take action, not just for myself, but for all the other spurned souls damaged by Len's detestable actions. He needed to face true consequences for his reprehensible behavior, not just get shuffled off to his next willing victim. I was through being the naive, demure little wife who turned a blind eye to preserve the fantasy of marital bliss. It was time for Len Thomas to reap what he'd sown. The facade of the perfect family man came crashing down, and I would make sure the whole world saw him for the insidious fraud and cheater he really was. With the full, sickening scope of Len's betrayal now laid bare before me, I felt more alone than ever before. Who could I even trust after being so completely deceived by the person I loved most? I thought about reaching out to my own family for support, but quickly dismissed the idea. My parents were traditional types, the sort who would sooner bury the ugly truth than face it head-on. They'd just tell me to keep quiet, go to counseling, and plaster on a happy face like a good wife. No thank you. As for Len's relatives, I could already hear the dismissive squawks of his overbearing mother, insisting her precious Lenny Bear could do no wrong and that I simply didn't understand the stresses he was under. I didn't need that kind of warped enabling and victim blaming. So I turned to the only person I knew I could trust implicitly, an old college friend named Claire. Though we'd drifted apart over the years, raising families of our own, Claire and I could always shoot straight with each other. She'd been my maid of honor and staunchest supporter when I got married. Now it was my turn to lean on her strength. "Oh my God, Marla," she gasped after I poured out the whole sordid tale over coffee one rainy afternoon. Tears of outrage pooled in her eyes as she squeezed my hand. "How could that scumbag do something like this? You don't deserve any of this." I gave her a weary shrug, the weight of it all crashing down yet again. "I really don't know, Claire. I'm just so embarrassed and feel like such an idiot." "No," she cut me off firmly. "Do not blame yourself for that bastard's sins. The only one at fault is Len and his rampant disrespect. I'll bet anything he's done this to other poor souls, too." My eyes went wide as the light bulb flickered on. Of course, Len's insatiable appetite for new conquests surely meant I wasn't the only one suffering his deceitful ways. If I could just find others in my position, maybe we could take him down once and for all. Without saying another word, I pulled out my laptop and started furiously typing out messages to ex-classmates, neighbors, fellow military wives, anyone who might potentially cross paths with the charming yet soulless creep known as Leonard Thomas. Before long, the responses started trickling in. Stories of being cruelly misled, belittled, or pumped for money under the guise of business investments. Some brave women even laid bare their most intimate violations at Len's calloused hands. It made me sick, but also strengthened my resolve for justice tenfold. "You see what a cesspool we've stumbled onto?" I murmured grimly at Claire as we read each new confession. "That sick, twisted man has left a wake of broken lives in his path." Claire pursed her lips, eyes narrowed with fierce determination. "No more. We're going to stop this once and for all." Within days, the trickle had become a flood of outrage and anguish from women near and far, all united by the same experience of being cruelly manipulated by Len Thomas. We formed a network, sharing evidence and stories, building an unshakable case that would ultimately prove Len's guilt beyond any doubt. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel so alone and powerless in the face of such devastating betrayal. As I looked around our ragtag band of survivors, I saw the flickers of hope and resilience igniting within each woman's eyes. We weren't just victims anymore. We were the agents of Len's ultimate reckoning and undoing. And we would have our furious revenge. Our motley crew of wronged women gathered in Claire's basement one chilly autumn evening, the fire crackling as we nursed glasses of red wine and plotted our next moves. "We've got the evidence," Claire stated, her voice steely with determination. "Bank statements, phone records, testimonies, the whole 9 yards of sickening proof against Len and his escapades." Murmurs of assent rippled through the group. A few women shifted uncomfortably on the well-worn couches, haunted looks clouding their eyes. We'd all shared our shocking tales over the past weeks, each seeming more depraved than the last. But how can we make sure he actually faces real consequences this time? Tara, one of the younger members, spoke up hesitantly. She twisted a friendship bracelet around her wrist, a nervous tic I'd noticed whenever she recounted Len's salacious sexual coercion. What's to stop him from just moving on to the next town and starting over like none of this ever happened? A heavy silence fell over the room as we all considered the harsh truth of her words. Len was an expert linguist, fluent in lies, manipulation, and deceit. He could easily slither his way out of any corner we boxed him into, unless we went for the jugular. "We hit him where it hurts most," I said, gripping the arms of my chair. His money, his career, his precious reputation in this community he's toyed with for decades. Nods and murmurs of approval met my suggestion. I could see the fire sparking behind each woman's eyes, burning away the cobwebs of doubt and insecurity that had kept us entangled in Len's web for far too long. We take all our evidence, every incriminating letter, photo, and illicit recording of his misdeeds, and we plaster it on the front pages. We shove it in the faces of his bosses at the insurance firm, his co-workers, our friends and neighbors. We make sure no one in this town can turn a blind eye to the abhorrent reality of who Len Thomas truly is. Smiles grew wider as I spoke, building up momentum. We were no longer powerless, no longer forced to suffer in silent shame while he carried on unchecked. For too long, Len had controlled the narrative, painting himself as the well-intentioned family man while lying straight to our faces. Now it was our turn to dictate the story and expose him for the immoral, self-serving scumbag that he was. We hit up every community gathering, every church social, every public event with our proof, Claire declared, rising to her feet. Let him try and hide or deflect when we bear it all for the world to see. A chorus of cheers and clinking glasses filled the air as the pieces fell into place. We spent the next few hours strategizing and preparing the final steps, channeling our fury and disgust into cold, calculated determination. By the time the last log was consumed by the sputtering fireplace, we had our battle plan traced out to the letter. The stage was set for the ultimate takedown. There would be no more second chances, no more benefit of the doubt for Len Thomas. He'd created this grotesque reality through deeds, lies, and callous disregard for anyone's well-being but his own. And now he would be forced to reckon with the full consequences in front of everyone. I caught my own reflection in the darkened windowpane and did a double take. The woman staring back at me was gripped with a ferocious hunger for justice and payback that was both exhilarating and chilling. Len had awoken a merciless force within me, one I never could have imagined existed under the surface. By the time we were through with him, he would know what it felt like to have his life ripped apart by deceit and betrayal. There would be no escape, no reset button to salve his constantly growing trail of destruction. He'd made his choices, and now the world would see them laid bare for what they truly were. The annual Oakwood Community Fundraiser was always a big to-do in our little suburb. A full day of food trucks, games, music, and mingling, all in the name of supporting local schools and charities. A week ago, I would have been front and center helping to organize it all as I did every year. But today, my sole focus was ensuring Len's reckoning played out on the biggest stage possible in front of everyone he'd spent decades deceiving. "Are you ladies ready?" Claire asked in a low voice as we clustered behind the main pavilion, sending a final flurry of messages on our phones. "This is our one shot to pull this off." I took a deep, steadying breath, looking around at the determined faces surrounding me. Pamela, a lawyer's wife who loaned us the projector we'd be using. Kendall, who printed out hundreds of flyers outlining the ugly particulars of Len's transgressions. Jessica, whose tech expertise would ensure our video evidence played without a hitch. We were a united front, an army of the wronged who had been pushed too far, trampled on by one man's bottomless pit of narcissism and infidelity. Today the debt would finally be paid. "Let's do this," I said with a grim nod. Our plan was simple, yet brutal. First, we would circulate through the crowd and hand out flyers detailing the tip of the iceberg. Len's affairs, lies about his work obligations, the mistress he was canoodling with in our very own backyard. Let the gossip and whispers reach a fevered pitch. Then, once enough eyes were focused on the main stage, we'd hijack the AV setup under the guise of an important community safety message and unload the full bombshell. Videos, emails, chat logs, phone records, hard evidence of Len's depraved manipulation, gaslighting, and financial treachery spanning years. The receipts, as the kids call them. Finally, once the proverbial bomb had been detonated, Pamela would take the stage and invite every last one of Len's victims to bravely share their unvarnished stories. No more secrets. No more carefully curated veneers. This was about laying it all out in the harsh light of day, no matter how ugly it got. I felt my stomach churning as our group dispersed, Kendall and Jessica taking their posts handing out the flyers. Deep breaths. You can do this, Marla. Striding towards the entrance with more confidence than I actually felt, I caught sight of my target. Len perched at one of the beer gardens, his arm draped idly around a young, overly made-up woman I didn't recognize. Of course. He just couldn't help himself, even after the devastation his actions had wrought. Seething, I shoved the incriminating flyers towards him, practically snarling as I spoke through gritted teeth. You should really take a look at these, Len. He glanced down at the damning evidence splayed before him, his face quickly draining of color. What the hell is this? Your reckoning, I spat back, wheeling away before he could respond. As I stalked back towards the staging area, I could already feel the rumbles of shock and outrage rippling through the crowds. The tendrils of doubt about Len's true nature were rapidly spreading through every nook and cranny like insidious vines, and that was before the full reveal. By the time we hijacked the AV system, Pamela's stern baritone voice ringing out over the speakers, hundreds of eyes were already locked on the towering projection screens. Neighbors, co-workers, parents of our kids' friends, they all watched in stunned silence as a cavalcade of incriminating videos and evidence poured forth. Len's confidently barking orders at his mistress during a dirty video chat, right alongside timecodes proving he was on a business trip at the time. Itemized statements showing thousands siphoned into private accounts to fund his sex vacations and indulgences. A frantic string of texts from Beth, one of his co-workers, describing her fears about being pregnant, and the haunting follow-ups where she despaired over having an abortion to avoid being found out. The floodgates of truth and consequences had burst wide open, and there was no turning back now. As the soul-crushing revelations spilled out one by one, I scanned the crowd for Len, my jaw clenched when I finally spotted him. Standing alone in an open field, hands jammed into his pockets as the gathered masses' gazes bored directly into him. There would be no fast-talking or smooth avoidance today. The lifetime con man had finally been cornered, and the spotlight of judgment had turned blindingly harsh. The crowd's stunned silence quickly gave way to a deafening roar of shock and outrage as the full breadth of Len's depravity played out on the massive screens. Seeing his most twisted misdeeds projected in high definition was like a bucket of ice water being hurled at our community's collective face. I locked eyes with Len, frozen in the center of that grassy field amidst a sea of accusatory glares and shouts. His smarmy facade of confidence had fully crumbled as the horrifying truth was laid bare before everyone. His mouth hung open, pale and trembling like a cornered rat. In that moment, I almost felt a flicker of pity for the pathetic, hollowed-out shell of a man before me, but it was far too little, far too late for such mercies. That's enough. Pamela's commanding voice boomed over the speakers as she strode onto the stage, her stern expression cutting through the din like a knife. Now that you've all seen the harsh reality of Len Thomas's reprehensible actions and deceptions, I invite those he's directly wronged to come forward and share their stories. The lies end today. There was a weighted pause as Pamela held the microphone out with an unwavering gaze, almost daring anyone to break the suddenly tense silence. After a few harrowing seconds, Claire was the first to make her way up onto the stage, shooting me an encouraging nod. Soon, a trickle became a steady stream of other women ascending the steps. Friends, colleagues, former lovers. Each took turn at the mic, voice shaking yet resolute, as they finally unburdened the trauma and pain Len had inflicted. The theme, as it went on, was clear. Len was a chronic predator who stopped at nothing to feed his endless need for ego and sexual gratification. Tales of infidelity, gaslighting, blocked messages, and ominous threats spilled forth one by one. Financial schemes, hushed-up abortions, blatant lies straight to the faces of loved ones. As the stories piled atop one another like grisly Tetris pieces, there was no denying the overwhelming evidence of Len's unfathomable betrayals. As if the footage wasn't damning enough, Pamela stated at one point, glaring out at Len, who still stood unmoving, hands jammed into his pockets. I think we can all agree that Mr. Thomas has clearly been living a profoundly sick double life at everyone else's expense. Another chorus of howls and furious jeers erupted across the gathered onlookers. I watched with a strange sense of detachment as Len squirmed under their escalating judgment, like the worm who'd finally turned. There would be no smooth-talking way out of this deep, inescapable pit he'd willingly dug for himself over decades of duplicity. "Give it up already, you piece of trash! Get out of our town! Lock his slimy ass up for good!" The epithets and cries for vengeance rained down as people steadily fled the area, utterly repulsed and disgusted by the horrors they'd just seen. Word would spread like wildfire, infecting all corners of our insular little community. Len's smug, congenial mask had been shed, and his true self as a conscienceless manipulator left bare for all to gawk at in stunned revulsion. Even his own employer and co-workers couldn't turn a blind eye anymore. Not after the shocking betrayals and damning evidence we'd painstakingly compiled. By night's end, his office keys, laptop, and credentials were retrieved, and he was barred permanently from setting foot on the insurance agency property. As for his financial deceptions and siphoning our money into private slush funds, it didn't take long for the lawyers, and eventually law enforcement, to swarm in and start connecting those nefarious dots. Everything he'd worked so hard to conceal was now inextricably out in the open, free for due process to take its long overdue course. Within a matter of days, Len found himself being served with divorce papers from my attorney, slapped with lawsuits, charges of fraud, and more from no less than 6 different wronged parties. Just that quickly, his plush yuppie lifestyle was imploding from every conceivable angle, the full weight of his sins coming crashing down upon him. As I watched the karmic tornado steadily consume him from afar, I almost felt nothing. No sense of victory or relief, just emptiness and the creeping realization that the man I'd loved for decades never truly existed at all. Len was gone. Or perhaps he never really was there to begin with. The grand illusion had finally dissipated completely, leaving only the harsh truth as exposed and ugly as it was. But at last there was justice, merciless and inescapable, just as it should be. In the weeks and months following Len's cataclysmic downfall, I found myself adrift, grappling with waves of anger, sadness, relief, and emptiness, all washing over me. 45 years old, newly divorced, with hardly a nest egg to my name, thanks to his financial treachery. How does someone even begin to rebuild their life from such smoldering wreckage? I thought about moving away, putting the devastation of our hometown in the rearview forever. But fleeing wouldn't solve anything. As my new friends helped me realize, true healing could only begin once I confronted the innermost demons and fears that Len had exploited all those years. It started small, reaching out to a therapist who specialized in recovering from narcissistic abuse, leaning on Claire and the other women whose solidarity and friendship had become a lifeline throughout my darkest hours. Reclaiming little indulgences for myself that Len had always criticized or outright denied, like getting my hair done or taking a weekend hiking trip with no schedule or demands. Slowly, achingly, the stranglehold of misery and self-doubt began to loosen ever so slightly. I found moments of levity and self-rediscovery peeking through the fog of anguish and anxiety, a journey of reclaiming my sense of self one tiny step at a time. But nothing prepared me for the heart-rending task of explaining Len's unforgivable betrayal to our son, Evan. The boy, now a grown man of 21 studying at State, had always idolized his father, despite his frequent absences and emotional distance. My heart broke into pieces watching the light of hero worship flicker and die behind his eyes, his shoulders sagging from the weight of 1,000 disillusioning realizations. We spoke in hushed tones over coffee and Danish at that little cafe by his campus apartment as I relayed grim details as gently as I could. His father's serial infidelities and sexual improprieties, callous financial deceptions, the sheer staggering depth of his double life. Evan's face remained impassive and still as a statue as I went on, each seismic revelation sending another fracture through that youthful innocence and optimism I'd always envied so much. "Don't know what to say, Mom," he managed weakly once I'd laid it all bare. His reddened eyes brimmed with tears of confusion, anger, and hurt unlike anything I'd ever seen. To even think my own father could do something so sick and cruel. Reaching across the table, I gave his hand a firm squeeze, believing in my bones that stark, unvarnished honesty was the only way forward from such a catastrophe. "I know, sweetie, and I'm so sorry you've been put through this nightmare, too. Your dad, he was a fundamentally broken person, ruled by his own selfishness. You're one of his victims just as much as me or anyone else." My heart clenched as Evan's lower lip began to tremble, his stoic facade crumbling as hot tears cut tracks down his cheeks. I quickly pulled him into a fierce embrace, cradling his tall frame as sobs racked his body. Not the strong, confident young man laughing at dumb memes just weeks earlier, but a wounded child grappling with the cruel reality that the man he looked up to most was a hollow fraud who valued nobody's life but his own. As I gently rocked him, rubbing soothing circles on his back, I doubled down on my vow from that first fateful day to fiercely protect my son from the caustic emotional poison Len had injected into our family unit. If it took years of dedicated therapy or professional guidance to undo that insidious damage, so be it. No more half-truths or papering over the ugliness to preserve messed-up notions of keeping a happy facade. Evan and I would confront and process every ounce of Len's depravity and betrayal head-on, no matter how painful, until we regained the unshakable bond of trust and support he'd so callously violated with his deceptions. As the now familiar pangs of fury mixed with heartbreak flowed through me again, I gently extricated myself and looked my son squarely in the eyes, cupping his face in my hands. "I promise you, Evan, we're going to get through this together and come out stronger on the other side. That man's evil will not define who we are or how we move forward from here." His brow knit with resolution. He gave a slow but emphatic nod. "You're right, Mom. We'll heal. Just don't ever shut me out again, okay? I need you now more than ever." I pulled him into another fierce hug, feeling more reinvigorated and purposeful than I had in forever, as the first crucial steps of our new beginning started to come into focus, a path by uncompromising truth, no matter how ugly or painful, fully peeling away Len's insidious mask and banishing its withering stain once and for all. A righteous cleansing, not just vengeance for vengeance's sake, but purposeful self-preservation and reclamation of our autonomy. With Evan by my side, I knew our journey would be long and arduous, but no longer would we compromise what was right in the face of such sickening depravities. We were drawing our own map forward this time, scars, emotional wreckage, and all. Our destination was healing, even if the roads were still hidden from view. But one thing was now etched in stone. There would be no more lies, no more shying away from ugly truths. The slate had been wiped brutally clean, and it was time to rebuild something brand new, out of the ashes.
My brother graciously extended an invitation for us to remain at his house. There was no rent or utility fee. Stephen, my spouse, is a mechanic, and I work in finance. We live in the home where I was reared, a site with great significance in my family's past. It had originally been my father's company's headquarters. Since it was expected that my brother would take over the family business, he decided to study economics at Oxford University and earn a degree in the subject. There, he learned a great deal, and after his return to New York, he worked alongside my father to manage the company. My brother was given the business, and I was given the house when our parents chose to retire and move. I decided to move in with Stephen. The house is in a perfect location close to hospitals, schools, stores, and public transit. It is ideal for our requirements right now, and will stay that way even after our kids move away. We are incredibly appreciative of my parents for this gift and are excited about our future in this house. But soon after we settled in, my mother-in-law's frequent visits broke the silence. Since my parents had owned businesses in the past, she frequently asked about their financial situation. "Angela, how much money do your parents have?" was one of her questions, and I felt uneasy when I heard, "What will you inherit when they pass?" I pretended that I hadn't given it any thought, and that the house might be the amount of any legacy in an attempt to divert her attention. She persisted, implying that my parents must have talked to me about their financial intentions despite my attempts to brush it off. Her curiosity appeared to be motivated by hopes of benefiting from their money. I knew exactly what I would inherit, but there was an unanticipated tension in this circumstance, and I began to wonder about her motivations. In an effort to prevent any further issues, I decided not to discuss my worries with my husband, who is quite close to his mother. But then something entirely unexpected happened, which caught me off guard. On a holiday morning, at roughly 7 a.m, our doorbell rang out of the blue. To my surprise and confusion, there was a mover there when I opened the door. My mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family showed up and announced they were moving in before I could collect my thoughts. The smiles on their cheeks made me shiver. When my husband awoke to the noise, he didn't seem to be bothered by it. He asked me simply, "What's the problem?" When I questioned him, he mentioned how there was enough room in our house for everyone, as though it were natural for them to move right in. When my sister-in-law announced that my brother had invited them, the surprises didn't stop. With a smile, she added that they would not have to worry about utilities or rent and that they were looking forward to our hospitality. In the meantime, my brother-in-law started to nosily go about the rooms, declaring out loud which he liked most based on the amount of sunlight and telling Stephen to pack up our stuff. I experienced dizziness as this bizarre situation developed because of the shock. They were opening doors and asserting claims to rooms like they owned the property, even though this was our home. For a while now, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had been quite controlling. On a few earlier occasions, my sister-in-law had even dug into my purse without my consent. My patience was wearing thin as their bold actions persisted in invading my personal space. The final straw was this. I eventually took a stand after becoming irate and assertive. I said, "This is my house. Why do you behave like you own it? I'm done. I desire for everyone to depart. It was time to take back my area and make our house peaceful again. I'm not one to shout or get angry often, but seeing these individuals take over the house my parents had given me and treat it like their own made me lose my temper. I became enraged and yelled at the three of them for that reason. That's when things abruptly got out of hand and one of them shot back, saying, 'How dare you talk to us like that? It is you who ought to go.' A moment later, there was a stinging sensation on my cheek. It was a moment before I realized I'd been slapped. I was in astonishment, with a sharp aching in my cheek. Something inside of me just broke at that very moment. It seemed unimaginable to live with someone capable of such disdain. But this was my house, and I wasn't going to let them treat it like a free dorm. I decided to take a hard look at my options and temporarily depart. I discovered a monthly rental apartment to stay in for the time being and hurriedly packed some things. I would have to commute to work as a result, but at the time it felt like the only practical choice. After I was comfortable, I called my folks to share my story. I could feel their wrath even over the phone. My father was especially upset because he had always done a wonderful job of juggling his roles as a loving parent and a stern CEO. It was awful to involve them in this mess, particularly when they were enjoying their retirement. However, as my proper house was being encroached upon, I was left with no alternative. I knew my husband and his family were growing accustomed to my home, even as I was getting used to living in a rental unit. Inspired by advice from my father and brother, I made the decision that more action was warranted. During a work break a few days later, I checked my phone and discovered that my spouse had numerous missed calls and messages. I knew exactly why he was trying to reach me. It was time to address this situation head-on, but this time I would be prepared and not alone in my fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. In response to the untenable situation at home, I decided to take a firm step by contacting the utility companies to disconnect the electricity and water services to the house. Our home is entirely dependent on electricity. Without it, nothing functions. We hadn't installed solar panels yet, so there was no alternative power source. Given the current heat wave, I imagined living without these basic amenities would be quite difficult. This action likely prompted the flurry of calls from my husband, who was probably trying to manage the sudden lack of utilities. Just as I was about to dismiss another call from him, he rang again during my break. "Hey, what's going on? There's no power, and the water isn't running. Did you cut off the electricity and water?" His voice was tinged with panic. I felt that since the house was mine, and I was no longer living there, it didn't make sense to continue paying for utilities I wasn't using. The house belongs to me, and now that I'm not there, it wouldn't be sensible to keep the electricity and water running. I explained that keeping these services active would mean I'd have to cover the bills, which didn't seem fair under the circumstances. When I shared my reasoning, my husband became very upset and demanded that I turn the services back on immediately. However, just because he wanted them reinstated didn't mean I was obliged to comply. I told him if they wanted the utilities back, they should pay for them themselves. Every time we discussed finances, they insisted that since it was my house, I should bear the costs, but their actions spoke differently. I had no intention of renewing the utility contracts or asking them to vacate the house. Immediately after making my stance clear, I ended the call as my break was finishing. Later, my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law all reached out with similar requests, complaining about the unbearable heat and inconvenience caused by the lack of water. They wanted me to reconnect the utilities, but my decision was firm. This was a matter of principle and a step towards asserting my boundaries within my property. After hearing their complaints, I firmly told them to handle the situation themselves and hung up the phone. I suspected they were just being opportunistic, hoping I would cave, and they could continue living comfortably at my expense. However, even after a week, there was no sign of them leaving. Realizing I needed to take more decisive action, I consulted with a lawyer from my father's company. I explained the situation and requested that he send a formal notice to my husband, accusing them of trespassing. They had entered and occupied my house without permission, essentially forcing me out and treating it as their own. I made it clear in the notice that I was seriously considering legal action. This move shocked my husband, who, surprised and anxious about the legal implications, approached me hoping to find a resolution. Aware of their concern for their social reputation, I knew the threat of a lawsuit would be a significant stressor for them. Despite their desire to maintain their lifestyle, they were now caught in a dilemma between facing legal consequences and convincing me to let them stay. I could see through my husband's intentions clearly, but I refused to listen to their pleas and did not relent to his requests. In a moment of frustration, my husband exploded in anger during a call at his workplace, demanding that I drop the lawyer and accusing me of acting self-righteous. Despite his loud outburst, I remained calm and unaffected, simply annoyed by his audacity to claim rights over my property. No matter how much he protested, my stance was firm. If they come, I ended the call feeling that engaging further would be a waste of time. I had already discussed potential divorce proceedings with my lawyer. Upon returning home later, I found missed calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but decided not to engage further. I blocked their numbers to avoid any more disruptions. The threat of legal action and the looming possibility of a lawsuit proved too much for my husband's prideful family. Realizing their position was indefensible, they packed their bags and left the house. With the lawyer's assistance, the divorce negotiations proceeded smoothly. I arranged for a professional cleaning service to refresh the house. Finally, after living separately in a monthly rental, nothing compared to the comfort of returning to my own now sparkling clean home. The peace and autonomy I regained made all the efforts worthwhile, reaffirming my decision to stand up for my rights and reclaim my space. After moving back into my house, I realized it needed some updates and repairs in several areas. I discussed this with my father, who connected me with a trustworthy contractor. We started planning the renovations, which was an exciting project that marked a new beginning in my comfortably solitary life. Living alone brought a sense of freedom that was both exhilarating and soothing. I could relax on my sofa without critique, eat whatever I fancied without comments, and just enjoy the peace. However, this tranquility was interrupted when I started receiving calls from an unknown number 5 months into my newfound solitude. Initially, I assumed it was the contractor and ignored the calls, but they kept coming. Eventually, I answered, only to discover it was my ex-husband, whom I had recently divorced with a strict agreement brokered by our lawyers to never contact each other again. Confused and annoyed by his breach of our agreement, especially since he had changed his number to make this call, I demanded to know why he was contacting me. Ignoring my questions, he pleaded desperately for me to listen. Despite my reluctance, he proceeded to explain his situation. His company was undergoing a severe financial crisis, resulting in a significant salary cut. Additionally, his mother's health was deteriorating, making her unable to work, and his sister-in-law and her husband were also in a financial bind due to unstable employment. Most of her earnings were being used to cover her husband's debts. With the salary reduction, my ex-husband and his family were struggling severely to make ends meet. Hearing all this did little to stir my empathy. The memories of how they had forcefully barged into my home, assumed control without my permission, and even attempted to push me out were still fresh. Their previous actions, filled with disregard and disrespect, made it hard for me to feel anything but disbelief at their current plight. I told him that his current difficulties were his to manage and reminded him of our legal agreement to cease contact. As I ended the call, all I could think was how unbelievable it was that people who had treated me so poorly expected any sympathy or help from me now. I listened, devoid of sympathy, as my ex-husband described their dire circumstances. "We're in serious trouble. We might not be able to pay our rent or even buy food tomorrow. We used to be a family, right? Please help us," he pleaded, his voice breaking with emotion. Yet his words did nothing to sway my resolve. I remembered all too well my struggles and how, when I needed support, he did nothing to help. He, along with my mother-in-law, had always looked down on me. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law joined in too, mocking my appearance and my traditional views without a care for my feelings. My mother-in-law not only exacerbated situations, but also pressured me relentlessly to have a child, pushing herbal concoctions on me, booking unnecessary medical appointments, and even spreading harmful rumors among our neighbors about my ability to conceive. Reflecting on these memories, it was clear there was not a single redeeming period in my marriage. Once kind and supportive, my ex-husband had transformed into a mere puppet under his mother's influence post-wedding. I recalled a particularly vivid incident where, returning from an appointment, I learned my mother-in-law had visited our home, cried to my husband about wanting to befriend me, but then slandered me at every opportunity, whether at home or in public. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law would ridicule me, laughing cruelly at my expense. How could I even consider aiding them now, given their past? Whatever you say, it won't affect how I feel. I said firmly, I cannot help you. I was determined not to let their current situation force me back into a demeaning and manipulative loop. I'm going to hang up now, and please never contact me again. I then hung up the phone and blocked the new number right away. I was ready to keep my distance from him and his family should they try to pull me back into their problems, even though I knew my ex-husband would try to change his number and reach out again. I was going to change my phone number at the store over the weekend to stave off more abuse. However, the deal made by our lawyers was broken by my ex-husband and his family before I could take action. About 10 o'clock at night, they suddenly arrived at my residence, knocked on the door, and said, "Open up. Please let us in and look after us. Since we are family, please assist us." They didn't care that it was late at night or that their loud shouts were disturbing the neighbors. They just wanted to ruin the quiet night. I tried to talk to them over the intercom, telling them to go home and stop making a commotion instead of going up against them. But they disregarded my entreaties and kept hammering on the door, making a lot of noise. I was about to call the police because of their irresponsible behavior, but then I heard sirens approaching. As it happened, a neighbor had already called the police. My ex-husband and his friends freaked out when they saw the cops because they thought I had called them. They attempted to run away, but they were unable to do so because of the throng of bystanders. The cops showed up quickly and took them to the station. I gave the police a detailed explanation of what happened, outlining the circumstances and my objection to their unjustified presence. The incident soon became the talk of the neighborhood, and through a co-worker who saw the scene, word even reached my ex-husband's place of employment. The public scandal and police involvement, on top of his wage cut, dealt the ultimate blows to his career and financial woes. His employer made the decision to fire him. His family's shared living arrangement fell apart as a result of his lack of income and inability to pay his apartment rent. Stephen, my ex-husband, and his mother currently live in public housing. Both of them are trying to make ends meet by working several part-time jobs, and even his mother is willing to help out financially given their current situation. Legal action was unavoidable if they persisted in squatting in my home. I am Kelly Brooke, and I am 43 years old. My second marriage ended without me having any children. My spouse is a good man who consistently shows up for our monthly dates. He always fulfills his commitments, regardless of how busy he becomes. I've never regretted getting remarried or divorcing my first spouse, even though I know I shouldn't compare him to him. Our 8th wedding anniversary is this month. My spouse got a reservation at a classy restaurant with an oceanfront view. I was about to have the best time ever, but then I saw the last person I wanted to see, my 13-year-old ex-husband, Jeremy Clarkson. As we were finishing our lunch and heading out of the restaurant, my husband excused himself to visit the lavatory. I was gazing out of the window at the vista of the ocean, remembering the wonderful times my spouse and I had shared gazing out to sea. I heard my name called just then. I looked back and there was Jeremy. "Hey, what makes this so lovely? To someone like you who is essentially broke, do you believe a typical ocean looks nice?" stated Jeremy. "I haven't seen you in a while. What brings you here?" "What brings me here?" Jeremy responded, taking a seat in the chair my husband had been occupying. "I should be asking you that." He treated me like a practical joke. I tolerated those eyes for the entire 10 years of our marriage. "I never imagined that you would be here. Is it really possible for someone with your level of income to eat at such an upscale establishment?" Is this something you'll only ever be able to afford once in your lifetime? It's our wedding anniversary, I answered back. Oh, I see. You know, poor people can only visit locations like these on their anniversaries. You know, I visit here quite a bit. You remain pitiful. Is someone else not with you? Yes, that is true. She was basically sent to pay. Money handling, is a woman's domain. I reflected that he remained unchanged, constantly disparaging women. Then I spotted her, his 13-year-old sweetheart. She was quite worn out from life, and her attractiveness had diminished to half of what it once was. Jeremy seems to be enjoying life to the fullest while his wife endures hardships. Are you still dressing shoddily, please? Don't you feel ashamed of how terribly you dressed? Jeremy went on. I felt sick talking to such a horrible man. With the hope that my husband would return soon, I moved my gaze to the bathroom. And there he was. He had been observing us while I was chatting with another man for some time. Observing my look of perplexity, he came over to join us. Excuse me, do you need something for my wife? Your spouse? Are you married to this woman? Yes. What is it that you need? You also have a bad appearance. Poor ladies, I suppose, always marry poor men again. Don't be impolite, please. I answered, my spouse is a very respectable man. Jeremy gave a disapproving snort. So you must be just a broke man and useless. Then he scowled at my husband. This man truly hasn't changed at all, I thought to myself. Jeremy was always incredibly self-centered. It was uncertain if he was truly competent at his position, even if he was employed by a large corporation. Still, he was really excellent at playing the boss. He aggressively asserted that his juniors' accomplishments were the result of his mentoring and laid blame for his own errors on them. I have no idea how he got up the corporate ladder, but at the time of our divorce, he was a manager. I never considered Jeremy to be an elite employee, despite his constant claims to the contrary. I received my degree from a famous university. Jeremy used to boast that his university was one of those unique ones, not just any old university. When we were dating, I felt he was incredibly brilliant because I believed all of his inflated claims. However, I found out after we were married it was his only genuine skill. Not only that, but he made fun of me all the time, even though I only finished high school. I take it your parents couldn't afford to send you to college. However, it benefits you. In any case, you lacked the mental capacity for it. You would not have been able to attend university for someone as dim-witted as you if your family had been wealthy. My desire was to begin working sooner rather than attend college, but my family was not impoverished. Well, enough with the justifications. You really can't seem to give up making excuses. After all, you're a woman who lacks competence, but isn't it beneficial to women? If women capture a competent man, they can survive being stupid or incompetent as long as they are attractive. They are able to lead fulfilling lives. It shocked me that he had changed after we were married, since I never imagined he would say such things. In addition, his father was only a director and his parents weren't rich landowners, yet he nevertheless denigrated anyone he perceived as being impoverished. You're not really good at anything. You can't even have children. You're terrible at cleaning, and you're a terrible cook. It was a big mistake to marry you, he would say. My inability to have children was not due to a medical condition, but rather to the stress that Jeremy brought about. He exclaimed, "Are you trying to feed me trash?" and threw them in the trash when I cooked with radish leaves to save money, despite the fact that my family had always emphasized frugal living and appreciating what we had. I became aware of how dissimilar we were as a result. He informed me he had a boyfriend one day. He was significantly older than the woman. He pushed for a divorce, claiming that remarrying a younger woman would be better for him. I signed the divorce papers, relieved to be free of such a man. My spouse questioned, "Who is this man, Kelly?" "He's my ex-husband, Jeremy Clarkson." "Oh, I see." I had already told my husband about everything Jeremy had said and done to me. It had been a painful 13 years, and I had shared it all with tears. My husband just listened quietly and finally said, "Let's be happy from now on. You really dared to marry a woman like her. Since you're marrying someone from a poor family, you must be broke too," Jeremy sneered. "Well, maybe not," my husband replied calmly. "Of course you are. So you're also a broke man, huh? Marrying a poor person means you're broke too, am I right? But why did you divorce such a wonderful person?" "Wonderful? Your eyes must be fooling you. Truly wonderful means having a beautiful wife like mine," Jeremy said, pointing to his wife, who stood there looking embarrassed. "Is that woman your wife?" "Yes, she's beautiful, isn't she? She's actually my boss's daughter." Marrying the boss's daughter definitely helps one climb the career ladder faster. Marrying a broke woman like you probably means you're just a regular employee. Too bad. "A regular employee? I haven't heard that in years," I said. "What are you trying to prove? A low-class guy marrying a low-class woman just means you'll both be broke for the rest of your lives. And you think you deserve to eat in a fancy restaurant like this?" "This level of restaurant isn't a problem for us," my husband calmly replied. "Yeah, sure, if that's what you think," Jeremy scoffed. Just then, a waiter passed by, and my husband pulled out a black card, instructing him to settle the bill. Jeremy was surprised by the card, but tried to hide it, snorting again. "Is that a black card? Showing off a card like that here? You're not used to it, are you? You must have borrowed it from someone, flashing it around. But later you'll have to pay back the person who lent it to you, right? I bet you're scared to spend money in a place like this. It's all just an act." Funny thing to say. Who would lend their card? I wonder. No matter how naive someone is, they wouldn't lend out a card like this, my husband replied. "How would you know that, Jeremy? You shouldn't say such insulting things." "What's insulting? I'm just stating the truth. There's no way you could be well off if you married a poor woman like her." "My wife is poor, you say?" "Yes, that's right. Her family's place is a rundown one-floor home. You know that, right? Or maybe you were too embarrassed to visit her home, so you went to a family restaurant instead. Meeting her parents at a family restaurant for a marriage proposal is unheard of. But for poor people like you, it's probably normal. A family restaurant, huh? The fact that you thought of that means you must have done it yourself. If you hadn't experienced it, you wouldn't have thought of it." "What are you talking about? I'm not short on money. I wouldn't do something so cheap. Yet you came up with it." "I never would have thought of that," my husband said, then turned to me. "Right, Kelly? What about you?" "Well, I think I'd like to go to a family restaurant occasionally, but we rarely get the chance," I replied. "Exactly. You're lying. When you were with me, you were happy to go to family restaurants." "That's because I had never really been to one before." "Oh, I bet you sure talk big now, coming to a fancy restaurant like this, acting all important. Maybe that's you. It seems like you don't fit in this kind of place." "What, you think I don't fit in here?" "There's no way I'm out of place. You're the one who doesn't belong here. Do you even know who I am?" "Why would I know you? If you want me to remember you, just become famous," my husband replied calmly. I am well known, but I guess it's impossible for someone like you to know me. You think I'm just a regular employee? I'm a manager, not just an employee. A manager, huh? Is that supposed to be impressive? Just then, the chauffeur arrived, greeted my husband politely, and said, "Sir, your car is ready." "Thank you." Jeremy looked confused. "What's going on?" "Oh, you're probably just the president of some small company. I work for a major corporation, the Brook Group, and I'm a manager there." "Oh, so you're still just a manager. Excuse me, you think you're important, but staying as a manager at your age won't get you far." "What? This man works at our company?" "Yes, he's been with us for a long time." "What do you mean? Our company? You're just an office lady from a small business." "That's right, but I don't have kids or any reason to quit my job." "So you can't have kids. I knew it. Something's wrong with you." "Hey, that's crossing the line." "Kelly is perfectly fine," my husband said, standing up for me. "If she's fine, why can't she get pregnant? Women are supposed to have kids." "I don't need to explain that to you. You can't say it because it would prove something's wrong with her." "This man is hopeless," Jeremy said. "Yes, he's beyond saving," my husband replied calmly. "This man's name is Jeremy Clarkson, right? I understand. He's fired. Kelly, please contact HR." "What? What are you saying? You think you can shock me with that? What company's president are you claiming to be? Are you trying to fool me with this obvious act?" "Are you stupid, Jeremy? My husband is the president of the Brook Group." "What? That can't be true," Jeremy exclaimed. But the driver nodded with a look of pity. "Seriously, is he really our president?" "Yes, and I am his wife, and the vice president of our company." "That's ridiculous. How could Kelly, from a poor family, end up as vice president with just a high school diploma? Those things don't matter. Whether someone graduated from high school or college doesn't determine their worth. That's ridiculous. I will never forgive anyone who insults my wife," my husband said firmly. "But there's a union. The union will protect us employees." "You're a manager, right? Managers are not union members, so you are not protected by the union. Didn't you know that?" "Seriously? Well, you better prepare yourself. Since you insulted my wife, you must face the consequences." Jeremy looked stunned, but my husband didn't care and asked me if we should go. We left the table that night. Perhaps bothered by what happened, Jeremy called, but his tone was completely different from his arrogance earlier. "Kelly, it's been a while." "What do you mean?" "We already talked this afternoon." "Ah, yes. What can I do for you?" "Your dismissal hasn't been processed yet." "Ah, you guys were just joking, right? About you being the vice president and your husband being the president." "No, it's all true. I'm surprised you don't know who your own company's president and vice president are." "But why would you be the vice president?" "Because the best way I can support my husband is by being in that position." "But it's strange. Why would a high school graduate be the vice president?" "It's not strange at all. I only graduated high school because I wanted to start working early. But after we separated, I earned a college degree." "Huh, really?" "Yes, there are schools you can attend from home." "So you really are the president's wife?" "Yes." "How did you manage to marry the president? When did you get married?" "We got married after I divorced you. I met the president soon after, and we dated for about 5 years before getting married." "Married? Why would the president take an interest in someone like you?" "Stop being so rude." "Oh, sorry. Connections are strange, aren't they? I just happened to meet the president. But even so, why would he marry someone broke like you? Is he a philanthropist? No one marries for charity. If he's not a philanthropist, did he marry you to make you his slave, maybe? Today you got lucky and got taken to a fancy restaurant, but usually you must be having plain meals and living a difficult life where you can't even buy what you like, right? Why would you think that? That's not true at all. You're the only one who would do such a thing. There's no way you could marry such a rich man. Why do you think so? Rich people have connections with politicians and other wealthy people. If a poorly raised woman like you shows up at their parties, it would embarrass the president. Or maybe he lets his mistress attend those instead. You're making wild assumptions. If you keep looking down on me like this, you'll truly regret it. I'm just concerned for you. A woman with a poor upbringing like you marrying a rich man like the president will only suffer. A regular employee's husband would suit you better. Marrying someone richer than me, you must be a foolish woman who can't see ahead. Who's the fool here? If you call just to say that, I'm hanging up. No, wait. I'm not trying to insult you. It's just true that you come from poverty, and that can't be helped. Thinking I'm looking down on you for that is completely wrong. You say I come from a poor family, but my father is wealthy. Your family is poorer than mine. I didn't mention it back then because of your pride, but your family home isn't even half the size of mine. Your father is just a department head, and you're still just a manager. That's not true. When I proposed to you, you were living in a small single-story house. That was because we were renovating our home at the time. We had stored all our belongings elsewhere, and it was just a temporary residence. There was no need to move to a big house, my mother said. That can't be true. You don't have to believe it. But since the renovation is finished, even if you say you want to visit my parents' home, you stubbornly refuse to go again. I couldn't tell you the truth. Who would want to visit such a poor, rundown house? You really are hopeless. Then I'll send you a picture. This is my family home. I sent a photo of a large mansion. That's my house. I lived there for a while after our divorce. What? That can't be true. It's true. If this is true, then why were you working as an office lady in a small company? If you're so rich, you wouldn't need to work. And if you did work, wouldn't it be at a large corporation? My father is the president of a major company. That company was a new one he started. When it was time to decide who would be the president, my brother was chosen for the role, so I volunteered to handle the administrative work. Now that company has grown to the top of the industry. Is that true? Were you really so rich? Yes, this is the truth. This is the real me, the person you used to look down on. So that's why you could marry the president? That's not it. I met the president because we shared the same hobbies. We met through our interests and hit it off. He didn't know I was from a wealthy family, and I didn't know he was the president. So you're at the company where I work because of that. How long had you been at that company? I joined right after our divorce. I had a connection by chance. Why? When you were with me, you were just a clerk at your brother's company. After we divorced, you changed jobs. That's right. My brother's company grew a lot, and he told me it was time to do what I love. So I decided to pursue what I always wanted to do. Then, just as a senior position became vacant, they offered me the job. But at that stage, I still had no connection with the president. He was still someone high up, out of reach. I don't understand. How can you have connections like that? Do rich people just connect with other rich people? That's why I'm saying those things don't matter. It's your mindset that's holding you back. As just a manager, I wonder why your wife hasn't gotten tired of you yet. She can't get tired of me. I'm supporting her. Keep up with that attitude, and you'll get what's coming to you. Anyway, that's the situation. So stop belittling me already. I wasn't trying to belittle you. I really thought you were poor. About that dismissal you mentioned this afternoon. Oh yes, your dismissal. After all the mocking you did, it's only natural you'd be fired. That would put me in a tough spot. Can you talk to the president so I don't get fired? What? You were just mocking me a lot, and now you're asking not to be dismissed? That's impossible. You know I have nothing but resentment towards you. Why? The fact that you don't think you're resented is truly surprising. What have I done to you? There's too much to even remember. It's that much. I bet your wife thinks the same as me. Why don't you ask her what she really thinks? Though I doubt she'll tell you. I only said those things because I thought you were poor. Why do you think I'm mocking you when I'm just being honest? Once words are spoken, they can't be taken back. You should understand that as an adult. I do understand that. Then you should understand why you're being dismissed, right? No, I don't understand at all. Please, I'll be in trouble if I'm fired. If it were just about this afternoon, the president might have overlooked it. But then you had to call and ask all these questions. My husband is here now, frowning. He really thinks you're hopeless. Maybe you should just give up. There's no saving you. No, if the president is right there, why can't you just say something? It's only natural for a husband and wife to be together. Besides, you didn't ask if someone was with me, did you? That's true, but you've made things worse for yourself. You mocked not just me, but my parents and my husband too. Look, I didn't think you'd get this angry. Please forgive me. If I had known you were wealthy, I wouldn't have said such mocking things. I won't say them again. Please forgive me. Just give up. I think your dismissal order will come down tomorrow. Wait, please. Jeremy's voice echoed on the other end of the phone, but I hung up and looked at my husband. The next day, Jeremy came to the president's office looking pale with dark circles under his eyes. He seemed to be in really bad shape. I was in a meeting with my husband, the president, discussing business matters, but I was shocked by Jeremy's appearance. Jeremy, what's wrong? I'm very sorry. Jeremy apologized as he sat down on the spot. Jeremy, what are you doing? Please just don't fire me. Explain what you mean. My spouse, the president, was aware of the discussion from the day before. I had told him everything, and he had surmised, based on my answers during the conversation, Jeremy remarked, ending the call. He thus had a very negative opinion of Jeremy, and was even more enraged than I was. I really apologize. I had no idea your wife was from a well-to-do household. She is, in my opinion, the ideal match for the president's spouse. I've also heard that she received her degree from the university, although via mail. She works hard, not like my own wife. So you got rid of her after deciding she wasn't suitable for you? Jeremy wondered how the president knew such a thing as he glanced up at him. I have, of course, informed my spouse everything. After all, we are weed. Or do you and your spouse avoid discussing your pasts? That was a long time ago, so it's not like that. Back then, I was rather young. I believed Kelly to be only the daughter of a poor man, so I justified having a mistress. How does that even happen? Is that the reason you believe it is okay to misuse your power or engage in sexual harassment? Explain what you mean. Tell me you haven't done it, please. Your female coworkers have voiced grievances. They say they'll call the police if our company doesn't deal with it. Yesterday, Our organization was just debating how to handle it when your derogatory comments appeared. Isn't it utterly hopeless? That's accurate. Although after witnessing you yesterday, it feels all too true. I never would have guessed that you were genuinely harassing or bullying someone. Do you not even consider women to be human? Do you believe they are beneath you? No, I never did. Firing me would be too severe. Even if that were the case, please be merciful to me. You do, in fact, have a family. You wouldn't be in trouble alone if you were dismissed. That's exactly right. My spouse turned to face me with a sly grin. Callie, what are your thoughts? Would you mind sending Jeremy to our branch in Michigan? Are you serious? The Michigan branch is essentially unsustainable as a business because it is located in a sparsely populated area. The branch was opened by the former president, who was from that town, to assist the locals. However, it is a lonely place with only one staff. It is said that the former employee became insane due to loneliness. In 5 years, we want you to make that branch right. We'll bring you back here if you can accomplish it. Naturally, you will live in Michigan in retirement if you are unable to. I'm grateful. Thank you, Jeremy replied, perceiving it as a gesture of goodwill from the president. He left for Michigan, but my husband and I both knew it would not be possible. There would be little profit to be earned, working alone for a limited number of town inhabitants. With great motivation, Jeremy made his way to the branch and brought his mistress, who had since become his wife, with him. However, she soon became dissatisfied with the alone and the cold and finally hit her breaking point. Even though he was referred to as the branch manager, Jeremy's income decreased dramatically. His wife and he would argue every day as a result. His city-bred wife didn't trust him, despite his assurance that if he turned things around in 5 years, he could go back to the head office. She returned to the city, leaving the divorce papers behind. For a year, Jeremy gave it his all. But despite his efforts, neither the population growth nor the profits were realized. He finally realized that nothing would change, no matter how hard he tried. He gave notice of his resignation in 2 days. Jeremy got in touch with his wife when he left the company, but she had moved on to someone else. Not only had she ignored Jeremy, but her new partner had also beaten him, sending him to the hospital. Following his release, Jeremy sought employment, but due to his advanced age, he was unable to get any, making his life more difficult. He eventually found himself living in a dilapidated apartment and working as a nightly store clerk as his main source of income. Standing alone at night in a store was the man who had once boasted of having graduated from a prominent institution. In my case, my loving hubby took care of me as always, and we had yet another amazing date this month. My life was drastically altered by our marriage, and I'm happy that Jeremy and I got divorced. I am Mia. I'm 38 years old. I had to relearn a lot of things in my life during the past 2 months, which has been difficult for me. My spouse, Willie, was mostly to blame for the challenges I encountered, but happily, someone kind intervened to prevent me from going through more hardship. Permit me to introduce you to the persons that have shared my trip. Lori, my sister, comes first. She's remarkably attractive and 5 years younger than me. Since I was the stereotypical nerd, and she was the life of the party, we had a lot of arguments when we were younger. She used to make fun of me, and it felt like jealousy underneath all of it. To little effect, our mother attempted to heal the rift between us. Our correspondence decreased after I left for college, but as I grew older and Lori got into her late teens, we started to get back in touch. Our relationship never really got close, although it did become better with time. In spite of this, I learned to embrace the degree of intimacy we were able to reach. Speaking of my ex-husband Willie, we hit it off right away when we first met at work. We made the decision to get married after 4 years of dating. We bought our first home together. The mortgage and the house deed were in my name because I was the one with a larger income. After we were married for a few years, Willie brought up the subject of having children. He took a cautious approach, hoping I would remain receptive. Willie started, "Honey, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we thought about having a family of our own. We've been together for a while now." I anticipated this discussion. I answered, "Willie, you know my reservations." He gave a nod. "I get it, but give it some thought. We are steady, and it may be amazing to see a variety of us in the wild." I exhaled. "Yes, but there's a lot of work and responsibility involved in raising children." Willie grinned. "And who is more responsible and industrious than us?" This succinct synopsis encapsulates the core of my current circumstances and the individuals who have contributed significantly to them. Even though I wasn't sure I wanted to have children, I couldn't help but comply with Willie's insistence. 4 years after we initially welcomed a son into our family, we then welcomed a girl. Willie was a helpful spouse at first, but things quickly changed around that. All of a sudden, I was responsible for our children's upbringing and our entire household. Willie's work took off after the birth of our first kid. He got promoted, and he started to out-earn me. In order to prioritize our family, he advised that I quit my work. Despite my initial reluctance, I eventually gave in to the constant pressure and adapted to my new full-time parental duty. I began throwing dinner parties to ward off boredom and keep a link to the outside world. These get-togethers, which frequently included my mother, sister Lori, and my mother-in-law Amanda, especially when she was visiting, became a treasured part of my daily schedule. There were consolation in this new chapter of my life. I loved having my family visit and spending more time with my kids. Despite the profound scars from a horrific second child birth that affected our relationship, my relationship with Willie appeared steady. But just when I believed I had settled in, a startling revelation rocked my foundation. I once discovered a pair of women's pants that I knew were not mine when cleaning out our bedroom. My heart fell as I saw them, feeling both shocked and saddened. Had I grown too little for Willie? The timing was especially hurtful because I was still recovering. Not even a year had passed from the birth of our second child and was seeing a therapist to address my postpartum issues. Though they were making modest progress, it seemed like a huge setback, one that left them feeling both betrayed and angry at Willie for perhaps being unfaithful. I required clarification. I took a picture of the pants and emailed it to Willie, requesting a response. I then went to his laptop and used his credentials to browse through his messages on social media. Upon initial observation, nothing seemed unusual. No strange names appeared, which only heightened my bewilderment and mistrust. Excitement mounted as I dug more into his digital life, wondering what else I may uncover. I went through all of Willie's conversations in a desperate attempt to find something, even though I knew deep down that it was implausible. At first, though, I wasn't concerned when my sister Lori's contact ID kept coming up in his chats, because I recognized some of the names that appeared. Why would it be the case? The communication between my spouse and sister shouldn't automatically cause suspicion. However, I followed my instinct and dug a little more, and what I found shocked me. Their messages were replete with declarations of love, sweet films, and private pictures. They even talked about Willie's departure from me. My stomach turned at the shock of my sister's betrayal. Although there were ups and downs in our relationship, I never thought she would harm me to this extent. I tried to approach Willie since I was so sick with hatred and betrayal, but he didn't answer, so I called Lori instead. With a nonchalant response, "Hey, what's up?" "Don't ask me, what's up, Lori? What's wrong with you, really?" My voice quivered with incredulity and rage. She answered incoherently, "I don't know what you mean." "Well, in my bedroom, I discovered a pair of your pants. Have you and Willie been having sex?" I broke into a laugh as I said the words. Her reply was very casual. "Yes, for some time now." "Really, Lori? You believed that sleeping with my spouse was acceptable. Did you find me uninteresting and didn't think twice about being my sister?" She was prepared with an odd explanation. "Look, I believed I was assisting you. Willie was occupied by me so you could concentrate on the children. I couldn't believe what I was hearing." "Are you serious? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would you help tear our family apart?" "I just want what's best for Willie," she said. "Okay, if I'm the best for him, then so be it." Her words were like a slap in the face. "You're disgusting," I spat out and hung up, unable to fathom her audacity. Alone and devastated, I lay in bed, tears streaming down my face as I grappled with the magnitude of the betrayal from the people closest to me. I never imagined my life would unravel like this. As I dealt with the fallout of my discovery, I had to push my emotions aside. My youngest daughter needed me. She woke up crying that night, and as I comforted her, I felt numb, mechanically moving through our routines without really being present. Throughout the day, I kept my distress hidden from my children. They didn't need to carry the weight of adult problems. I picked up my older child from school, prepared dinner, and answered their innocent questions about their dad's whereabouts with a fabricated story of him working late. As the evening wore on, my initial anger shifted to concern. It was nearing 10 p.m., and there was still no sign of Willie. I called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Desperation led me to dial my sister, but she too remained unreachable. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I finally fell asleep, clinging to a sliver of hope that this was all just a nightmare. Morning brought a harsh reality. Willie's absence was glaringly obvious. His belongings were missing from our bedroom. A quick check confirmed my worst fears. Most of his things were gone from our home. He had left in the night without a word, without any attempt at closure. Stunned and heartbroken, I knew I had to prioritize my children. I got them ready, dropped the eldest off at school, and took my youngest to my mother's house. My mom immediately sensed that something was amiss given my distant demeanor. I struggled to keep up the facade as the morning progressed. The thought of raising 2 children on my own loomed large, and every time I snapped back to reality, the enormity of the situation weighed heavily on me. Eventually, my mother's patience wore thin. "Okay, I've had enough of your silence. What's going on?" she pressed. Gathering my courage, I started from where it all began. "Well, I found out Willie has been cheating on me." Her shock was palpable. "What? How do you know?" I sighed, the words heavy on my tongue. "I found another woman's underwear in our bedroom." As I recounted the details, the conversation opened a floodgate of emotions I'd been holding back, marking the start of a new uncertain chapter. When I confronted Willie about the unfamiliar underwear, he didn't respond, and then he just left. "He left? What do you mean?" my mom asked, bewildered. "When I woke up this morning, all his things were gone. I explained. The disbelief was still fresh. I didn't even have a chance to stop him. I fell asleep around midnight, and when I woke up, he had taken everything. Oh my God, my poor girl. I'm so sorry this happened, my mom exclaimed, her voice filled with sorrow. It gets worse, I continued, hesitating as I prepared to reveal the full extent of the betrayal. Oh no, what happened? Do you know who Willie cheated on you with? She asked, a sense of urgency in her voice. You mean, do you know who he cheated with? I corrected gently. Yeah, I snooped through his things to find out. I normally wouldn't invade someone's privacy like this, but I had to know. So who is it? She inquired anxiously. It's Lori, I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. Excuse me? What? Are you serious? She gasped, shock painting her features. Yes, my sister. I called her to ask about it, and she was so casual about it. I continued, my voice shaky. She said they were in love and believed she was the best for him, so she was going to keep being with him. Oh my God, what has Lori done? My mom lamented, shaking her head in disbelief. I don't even know how you're going to get through this. You have 2 kids to raise, and now you need to find a job too. Look, why don't we just get some rest while I try to process this? I'll be here to help you, okay? She offered, her tone reassuring. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mom, I agreed, feeling a bit relieved to have her support despite the chaos. Telling my mom wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I ended up sleeping while she took care of my youngest. When I woke up, I heard my baby crying and my mom yelling. I rushed out and saw her on the phone looking angry. She hung up and seemed surprised to see me. I'm sorry about the noise, she apologized, but didn't elaborate further. I knew she had been giving Lori a piece of her mind. Over the next few days, Mom stayed with us. It was easier to manage with one person moving in rather than 3. Lori kept trying to contact our mom, but she asked me to block Lori on her behalf. It was comforting to have someone who understood my feelings and stood by my side through this turmoil. During a particularly lonely period, I learned from mutual friends that Willie and Lori had hastily married. The news broke just a day after Willie had deserted us. Our friends, concerned and puzzled by the sudden developments, reached out, sharing the details of the betrayal. It was humiliating, but their response brought some solace. They supported me wholeheartedly, choosing to cut ties with both Willie and Lori. It was painful to digest the fact that they had moved on so quickly, but perhaps I shouldn't have expected anything less given their previous actions. When I relayed this to my mom, her fury was palpable. Normally a pillar of calm, seeing her so incensed by my sister's actions underscored the gravity of the betrayal. It was comforting, however, to have her unwavering support, not just emotionally but financially as well. She went above and beyond, assisting me in securing job interviews to help regain my financial independence now that Willie was no longer there to hinder my career. Managing day-to-day life with the kids was challenging but feasible. The hardest part was masking my sorrow when they inquired about their father. Despite the struggle, we persevered. About a week after Willie's departure, I received a letter from him. By then, my heart had hardened enough that I wanted nothing to do with his words, presumed apologies, or excuses. A week was far too long for him to reach out, especially after such a profound abandonment. In a moment of resolute anger, I burned the letter, a symbolic gesture of closing that chapter of my life. However, in quieter moments, curiosity gnawed at me. Part of me regretted not reading his words, wondering if there was any explanation that could make sense of the chaos he'd left behind. Sometimes I wished I had read the letter before consigning it to the flames, if only to know what he had attempted to say. Yet the decision was made, and I had to live with not knowing, focusing instead on rebuilding and moving forward for the sake of my children and myself. Amidst the turmoil, I often had to remind myself that nothing Willie could have written in that letter would alter my feelings toward him or undo the damage he caused. The next day, to lift our spirits, my mom and I took the kids to the fair. It was refreshing to immerse ourselves in the lively atmosphere, allowing ourselves to enjoy the moment and laugh. A welcome reprieve from the recent hardships. That evening, as we relaxed with a bottle of wine, I mentioned the letter to my mom. "Something came in the mail for me last night," I began. "Oh, what was it?" she inquired. Her curiosity piqued. "It was a letter from Willie," I replied. "What did it say?" she asked, expecting that I had read it. "I don't know. I didn't open it," I confessed. "You didn't open it? But why not?" "I just didn't want to deal with anything he had to say, so I burned it," I explained, perhaps more casually than I felt. "You burned it, Mia? What if it was something important, like divorce papers?" "The envelope didn't look official at all. I'm pretty sure it wasn't that," I reassured her. "Well, if you're sure, what do you think was in it?" she pondered aloud. "Maybe a weak apology, or perhaps he wanted his stuff back. I wouldn't be surprised," I speculated, trying to dismiss the nagging thoughts about its contents. "But how are you feeling about all of this now?" She shifted the focus back to my well-being. "Today was a good day. It's tough, especially when the kids keep asking about their dad. What do I even tell them?" I admitted, the weight of the situation momentarily clouding the day's joy. "It's slowly getting better, but only a little," I added. "As long as it's improving, I'm always here for you. And just so you know, I'm planning to cut ties with your sister. Everything I have will go to you and the kids," she stated firmly. "Oh, Mom, that means a lot. But are you sure? Lori is still your daughter," I reminded her, recognizing the magnitude of her decision. "I know you and Lori had your differences, but what she did is unforgivable. I raised both of you better than this, and Lori didn't care," she said resolutely. "She's no longer my daughter in my eyes." It was a harsh stance, and while I understood her position, I knew how difficult it must have been for her to arrive at this decision. Lori was still her child, and disowning one's child is a heart-wrenching choice to make. I felt a mix of gratitude and sadness, knowing the depth of my mother's support and the painful sacrifices it entailed. The thought of ever disowning my own children was unimaginable, and it only made me appreciate my mom's support even more. She was willing to make such a difficult decision for my sake, which filled me with gratitude. 5 days later, a sudden knock on my door interrupted the quiet routine I had settled into. I wasn't expecting anyone, and with my mom at work, visitors were a rarity. With caution, I opened the door just a crack to see 2 men dressed in black suits standing on my porch. "Can I help you?" I asked, peering out. "We are lawyers, and we have something for you," one of them replied, extending a note and then a check towards me. I cautiously accepted both, my eyes widening as I glanced at the check. It was made out to me for $920,000. Stunned, I stammered, "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," they assured me, urging me to read the note. The note began with the words, "Thank you for saving me." As I read further, I discovered it was from Amanda, my mother-in-law. She had tried to visit 5 days prior, but found no one at home. When she called Willie, He implied that he couldn't access the house because I had changed the locks. Sensing that something was off, Amanda pressed Willie until he confessed everything. Appalled by her son's behavior, Amanda decided to write me and her grandchildren into her will. In her note, she expressed her gratitude for my actions, which prevented her from entrusting her assets to Willie. She had been terminally ill and unfortunately passed away just the day before. Her final wish was to ensure that her daughter-in-law and grandchildren were well looked after. Tears streamed down my face as I absorbed the contents of the note. Amanda's unexpected kindness and the profound loss of such a supportive figure overwhelmed me. It was a bittersweet moment, realizing the extent of her faith in me and the magnitude of her final gesture. Amanda was an exceptional woman, known for her integrity and fearless spirit. This trait often put Willie on edge, but to me, it was a source of immense comfort. She remained steadfast, offering her unwavering support right until the end. Willie called shortly after Amanda passed away. Though I was prepared for a reconciliation attempt, I still opted to listen. "What's this all about?" he blurted out, wasting no time. "You ought to be more precise," I shot back, keeping my composure. When I asked, "Why weren't you at the house?" "I wrote you a note telling you to behave properly while my mom is here." "Yeah, the letter mentioned that," I said. "I never read it." "You torched it? It's all wrecked by you. Mom was supposed to help with her estate, but you've taken everything for yourself," he charged harshly. "Willie, that is incredibly hypocritical. You moved away from us and are now only contacting us financially. Luck isn't something you can influence. By shielding us, it's obvious that both your mother and I behaved in our own best interests." I replied, "Please don't contact me or the kids again," hanging up the phone with a strong sense of resolve. After that discussion, I acted quickly to get our separation approved. The divorce process proceeded smoothly, with me being granted exclusive custody of our children. Willie tried to contest Amanda's will in the hopes of securing a share of the bequest, but her documents blatantly favored me, so he was unable to succeed. Willie and Lori persisted in their attempts to get me to give in and share the fortune, but I refused to budge. Because of the inheritance's financial stability, I was able to set aside money for my kids' future education and make prudent investments to keep our family stable. This also made it possible for my mother to retire in comfort, and as the kids adapted to life without their father, I went back to work. When they're old enough to comprehend, I'll tell them the entire tale. Even if the events that transpired are still painful, I have hope for the future. Better times are definitely coming, and the future seems promising. The idea of having to raise the child alone while stuck with a pregnant lady was too much for me to handle. Despite the contempt in his eyes, he had a broad smile on his face since he knew this day would come. Though I had anticipated that, I hurried to my room, came back with some documents, and gave them to Adam. Shock distorted his face. "How absurd is that?" he cried. "What's this all of a sudden? It was, after all, your idea. Now sign it as soon as possible," I firmly stated. "I'll file it tomorrow." My remark struck a deep chord with him, and his face flushed scarlet. "Pay close attention," I said. "I'll make you regret all of the times you've treated and disregarded me. I am Rachel. I'm 31 years old. I was employed by a large mobile company until 5 years ago. When I was 26, I met my boss, Adam Johnson. We married after falling in love quite soon. Adam, who was 5 years my senior, was a great help, especially when I was a new employee with no experience. I was really appreciative of Adam's precise directions. We went out to eat frequently after becoming friends. I was ecstatic when he asked me out because I had never dated anyone before. As a cartoon aficionado, I have to admit that I was always more interested in 2D characters than real males, which is embarrassing. I began to feel pressure, though, when I noticed that my peers from high school and college were getting married. I made a secret self-promise to myself when I fell in love with Adam. He would be my first and last love. I was therefore ecstatic when we began dating and were married a year later. I was ecstatic. Adam was attractive and well-liked by our female employees. Many people congratulated us, saying things like, "Congratulations," or "I'm jealous, but I wish you happiness." And I felt proud to be his wife. I was ecstatic and had no idea what was going to happen next. "You're leaving your position," Adam declared. "You quit your job because you're married to me now, right?" The day after we registered our marriage, he told me. Adam shocked me by telling me this. Adam remarked, "I've always wanted my wife to concentrate only on the house. Don't worry, my income will support the two of us," he continued. However, he had never addressed it before, and this was somewhat abrupt. It stunned me. Adam had never said that I was going to quit before we were married. My father had encouraged me to accept my current position, and it didn't feel right to quit without warning. I wanted to explain, but I refrained from speaking since Adam's expression told me not to get into an argument. Although it's done, I should have told you. You are not required to report to work as of tomorrow. I'll manage the changeover, Adam said. Adam's comments were strong, but the news about beginning tomorrow came so suddenly that I felt lightheaded. He had been my supervisor, so I didn't think I could disagree with him. Despite having to quit my career without giving it a proper send-off, I was committed to ensuring our marriage would succeed. Since Adam had trusted me with the housework, I wanted to live up to his expectations. I put a lot of effort into doing housework, cooking, and making Adam's favorite foods. Adam ate without commenting on the food, but I yearned for an acknowledgement. I felt like no one knew who I was anymore when I quit my work. Adam inquired, "Is my jacket clean? Tomorrow is a big meeting for me." "Of course," I said in response. Observing his authoritarian tendencies and traditional beliefs, I told myself how fortunate I was to be his wife, and made an effort to live up to his expectations. I was totally dependent on Adam because I didn't have any money of my own. Frequently, our bond resembled that of a housekeeper and employer, rather than that of a husband and wife. Everything in our marriage went well until I became sick one day and was unable to get out of bed. I thought that the next day I would catch up on cleaning because I was so weak and exhausted. "What are you doing?" Adam demanded angrily as he walked into the bedroom. He tossed the cover off of me and said, "Get up and make some food." "I apologize. I'm not feeling well. Is there anything you can handle on your own today?" I clarified, thinking that would be understood. Adam scowled and remarked, "You don't work yet. You're lying down just because you feel a little sick," as opposed to nodding or offering me consolation. Pathetic. "Rise up," and gave me another kick. I decided to offer some news on the day Adam returned home after midnight, but the smell of booze when he came in made me queasy. He stumbled as he walked, his face heated. The amount of alcohol he had consumed was astonishing, especially because he had not told me. I stood in shock, even though I'd made dinner. I got out of bed, never imagining that he would make his ailing wife do housework. Before our marriage, I never would have thought he could be this kind of person. It was just too much. Perhaps I should have seen it sooner. I discovered that I was crying as I was doing chores. My health didn't get any better after a few days. I discovered later that I had missed my menstruation. I ran to the pharmacy in a panic to get a pregnancy test. I gave it a try, and the outcome was favorable. Joyful tears ran down my cheeks, and I told Adam the news as soon as he got home from work. My mood immediately improved. I decided to break the news the day Adam returned home after midnight. However, the stench of alcohol sickened me when he entered. He stumbled as he walked, his face heated. Given that he hadn't informed me that he would be out drinking, I was shocked by how much alcohol he had consumed. Having made supper and excited to tell my husband that I was pregnant, I informed him that I hadn't visited the doctor yet, so it wasn't confirmed. I started excitedly, but Adam's expression fell as he asked, "A child? How did you get here?" He spoke in a hard tone that was uncharacteristic of him. "Damn it, I don't want a kid. The worst is this. Raise it yourself if you're going to have it," he said. I was stunned by his harsh remarks. With disdain, he undressed and made his way to the loo. It was unbelievable to me. I found it incomprehensible that he would make such careless remarks about our child. My happiness vanished in an instant and was replaced by a profound sense of loss. Why would he say such things? He had never mentioned not wanting children before. We hadn't even been using contraception, so I naturally thought we both wanted children. As I hung Adam's jacket and was about to take his shirt to the washroom, I noticed something else. A piece of paper had slipped out from the pocket of his dress shirt. I could tell it was a receipt because of its texture. At first, I thought it was just a receipt from tonight's gathering and was about to throw it away. But then I saw the name of the place. "Is this a motel?" My hand trembled as I held the receipt. It was indeed a motel. The shock of this discovery weighed heavily on my heart. Why doesn't Adam love me? Isn't marriage supposed to be between two people who love each other? We've only been married for just over a year. How could this be? I have been lost in imaginary romances for years, never really experiencing a true relationship. I couldn't accept this harsh reality right away, but the idea of Adam cheating started to make sense, and everything began to fall into place. Had Adam been using me from the start of our marriage? Was he truly in love with the person he was cheating with, while I was just a convenient housekeeper? These doubts swirled in my mind. Was that why he reacted so harshly when he found out I was pregnant? As I struggled with these thoughts, nausea set in, and I became convinced something was wrong. Yes, there was no doubt now. Maybe the reason he made me quit my job was that his mistress worked there. Everything started to make sense, as if he had married me for stability, not love. The line between reality and my imagination became blurry, but I couldn't deny the cruel words he had said after learning about my pregnancy. That day, I decided to gather evidence of Adam's cheating. From then on, his cold behavior toward me was undeniable. It was as if he couldn't forgive me for getting pregnant. Even though I was suffering from morning sickness, he would deliberately eat smelly foods near me and criticize my housework, forcing me to redo tasks. My pregnant body had to endure a lot, and my heart felt heavy. Despite this, I continued to investigate his affair. Adam never let go of his cell phone, even taking it with him to the bathroom, making it impossible for me to sneak a look. When I secretly checked Adam's room, it was always neat and tidy with nothing incriminating in sight. He was meticulous at work, and his desk was always in perfect order. I realized it would be challenging to catch him off guard directly. I often checked Adam's pockets for evidence, like receipts, but my investigation was difficult. I thought about hiring a detective but didn't have the money. While I was deep in thought, I received an unexpected phone call from my father. "Hello, it's me, your dad. How are you?" he asked. Surprised by his call given his busy schedule, I replied, "Dad, what's going on? Aren't you busy with work?" "My employees have been doing well, so I'm not that busy," he explained. My father, the CEO of a company in Italy, was always a workaholic. I didn't have many childhood memories of playing with him, but I respected his dedication to his job. His unexpected call left me curious about the reason. "So what's happening?" I asked. My father then revealed a shocking truth. "Is that really true?" I asked in disbelief. "Yes, he's not the type to lie. I want you to believe me," my father reassured me. Initially, in shock and unable to respond, I felt a mix of anger and frustration as the pieces of the puzzle came together. "Thank you, Dad. I'll do my best," I replied. I thanked him before hanging up the phone. My investigation was finally paying off, but the new information also made me feel angry and frustrated. The tension between Adam and me continued to grow, and even though I was pregnant, Adam remained distant. Every time he acted this way, I felt a deep hatred towards him. Months passed, and our relationship stayed strange. Eventually, something happened that changed everything. At 9 months pregnant, I was always careful around Adam, living in constant fear. I tried to avoid him, leading a quiet and stifled life. One day, I cooked dinner as usual. When Adam came home, we sat at the dining table. As I quietly ate, Adam suddenly slammed his fork down. "What is this?" "It's tasteless," he exclaimed, throwing the food I had prepared onto the floor. I was shocked by his outburst and tried to understand what had just happened. The anger at seeing the meal I had cooked discarded right in front of me started to build up inside. "I've noticed you've been complaining about the taste of the meals recently," I said. Adam criticized my cooking, saying it was bland. Since becoming pregnant, I had been using less seasoning to make healthier meals. This was only temporary until the baby was born. If he found the food plain, he could have added some salt himself. Why did he have to throw it on the floor? I was about to argue when Adam sneered and said hurtful words. "I don't want a woman with a belly like a monster. You'll have to raise the kid by yourself," he said, looking at my swollen belly with a nasty smile. I had always feared this day might come, even though I hoped for a different outcome. Quickly, I went to my room, grabbed a document, and returned to Adam. "Fine, here are the divorce papers," I said, pushing the papers in front of him. Adam's face twisted in shock. "What the hell? What's this all of a sudden?" he stammered. "Well, it was your idea. Now sign it quickly." "I'll submit it tomorrow," I responded. The truth was I had been thinking about divorce ever since I began suspecting Adam of cheating. However, with a child on the way, I wasn't sure if I could support myself. But now I had a different plan in mind. My determination seemed to provoke Adam. His face turned red with anger. "Just watch. I'll make you regret every moment you looked down on me and tried to control me. Do you think you can survive without me? You have a baby to care for, and you'll regret this," he threatened. But my resolve was firm. I wasn't going to back down. "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me," I assured Adam. Maybe irritated by my confidence, he snatched the divorce papers and started filling in the blanks. "Here you go. If this is what you wanted, it's yours," he said. "Thank you," I responded. Adam probably didn't believe I would actually submit the divorce papers, as he handed them over without any fuss. The next day, I submitted the divorce papers and left the house. I knew he would be surprised when he came home from work and found out. After that, I moved to my parents' home, mostly because my father had returned to Australia from Italy and suggested that I stay with them. It was the right decision at the time. I was tired of my life with Adam and deeply thankful to my father. On the day I left our home, Adam called me 5 times, but I ignored all his calls. Eventually, he stopped calling, which made it clear that I didn't mean much to him. He was probably happy with his mistress and might even remarry soon. I decided to move on from Adam. 7 months passed, and I had my baby, who was born safely. I was now living happily with my parents and my baby. While I was enjoying this peaceful life with my family, Adam called again. I ignored his calls at first, but after several persistent attempts, I finally answered. "Hello, what do you want now?" I asked, weary of his tone. "Hey, what's going on? Why were you on that show? And since when were you the daughter of a CEO with millions of dollars? I never knew that." Adam's voice was full of surprise and anger. It turned out that Adam had seen a TV show that aired after I returned to my family home. I had been featured on the show because of my father's role as the CEO of a well-known global tech company. The show highlighted the lavish lifestyle of the CEO's family, and during the interview, they mentioned our family's wealth, estimating it at around $40 million. I never expected Adam to see that show, but the power of television is incredible. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you that I have an asset of $50 million due to an early inheritance. That's why I was able to divorce you, I said. Yes, my father had informed me about the inheritance, which gave me the confidence to live comfortably even after divorcing you. Upon hearing this, Adam's reaction was immediate, and he was furious. "What? That's not fair. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Half of it is mine, right? Give me the money now," he demanded. I calmly replied, "Just as I thought. After seeing the show, all you could think about was getting money from me. Gifts from parents aren't included in property division. Are you forgetting your own mistakes?" Adam seemed confused and asked, "What are you talking about?" I continued, "I'm tired of your anger, Adam. You called me, so you should know you can't blame me for what you did. You cheated, didn't you? With your new wife, who's a junior from your company? You started dating her even before our marriage." Adam was clearly shocked by the information I had from my father. I finally had the upper hand. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? My father has many contacts in your company, and one of them told me about your affair. I've never mentioned it, but I will be demanding child support." Still in denial, Adam protested, "Stop joking. Why should I pay child support? It's all because of you, right? You got pregnant on your own and slacked off with household chores. It's all your fault." Hearing Adam blame me without apologizing for his own mistakes was unbelievable. I couldn't believe I was ever married to someone so lacking in common sense. I knew then that leaving him was the right decision. Adam continued, "I'm broke. My wife spent all the money I earned, and now I'm in debt," he pleaded. Hearing his pathetic excuse, my anger turned into sheer disbelief. I never wanted to deal with such an unreasonable person again. With that thought, I firmly gripped my phone and said, "What are you talking about? Do you even realize how ridiculous you sound? I never want to deal with you again. I'll have my lawyer handle the child support. Don't ever call me again, and you will not see the child anymore. Goodbye." "Hey, wait," he called out, but I quickly hung up the phone. Afterwards, I blocked Adam's number and took a deep breath. It's over now, right? No more calls from Adam, I thought. I no longer wanted him disrupting my peaceful life. Just then, I heard my baby crying from the other room and rushed to soothe the baby. Ultimately, Adam began making monthly child support payments. He had to take out loans to pay for his living expenses because the woman he remarried was quite the spendthrift, according to a former colleague. Adam had apparently tried to reach me in an attempt to receive a piece of my inheritance because of these circumstances. But I did not give Adam a single dime. He was having financial difficulties now that his spending exceeded his income. Things just became worse for him, whether it was because he felt like his life was coming apart or because he couldn't stand to be denigrated by his peers. He made the error of beginning his job search just after quitting his present employer, which drove him into destitution. It had no effect on me at all that a coworker had told me this. I believed that he was deserving of all the difficulties. I will never forget the harsh words he spoke to me or the icy way he treated me. I genuinely hope he receives the justice he is due. With my parents' assistance, I'm loving being a parent in the interim. My child is developing normally and contentedly in my family's house. I feel loved and supported, and money is no longer a concern. My father, a prosperous CEO, said he intended to give me ownership of the business. This was unexpected but inspiring news. I came to the realization that I had to get ready for the duties involved in managing a business. I want to make my father, who has always been a hardworking man, proud. I then started studying more about the company and doing little jobs to get a feel for how things operate. I was committed to succeed even though I knew it wouldn't be simple. Rebuilding my life has been made possible by living with my parents. I'm feeling more self-assured and prepared for the future. My father's confidence in me has motivated me to pursue my goals. His faith in my potential has grown to be a source of strength for me. I try to balance my responsibilities as a mother with my plans to take over the business every day. Though it's difficult, I enjoyed every second of it. My parents' encouragement and my infants laughing keep me going. I am appreciative of my second opportunity at life, free from the destructive partnership with Adam. I think back on my time with Adam a lot. Although his cruelty and betrayal caused me much pain, they also gave me important life lessons about courage and value. I've learned from it and become stronger as a result. Right now, my main goal is to provide my child and myself a bright future. The anticipation and thrill of what lies ahead are gradually taking the place of the agony of the past. I'm committed to giving my child a happy and stable life, and I believe I can accomplish anything I set my mind to when my family is by my side. I can now clearly see that my decision to leave Adam was the right one. It made it possible for me to rediscover who I am and what my actual potential is. I am not the fearful, insecure person I used to be. I'm a powerful, competent lady who is prepared to face the world. Adam needs to realize the repercussions of his actions, I hope. For my part, I'll just keep going on, seizing every chance that presents itself, and living each day to the fullest. I am certain that I can rise to any challenge and am prepared for whatever the future holds.